What is happening, friends? Please excuse me, I was just wearing a nice suit for one of my jobs. It is fun. I work, sorry about this. I go in and analyze the UFC after it is done for TSN up here in Canada, and took my suit off and put my t-shirt on. So and I wanted to get in here and think about a couple of things about this fight pretty much right away, because it's really interesting to me, at least. So Curtis Blaydes looked fantastic. I really enjoyed that fight. It was cool to see how exhausted he was at the end and how hard he fought. But I think for a lot of people, one of the more interesting aspects of the fight was a young gentleman fighting in only his sixth fight, retired. They call it TKO or win due to retirement. When a guy after, or a girl or whoever is fighting, after a round, between rounds says, I don't want to fight anymore. So, gentleman tonight, after round two, now this guy only had 5 pro fights. 5 pro fights of which he had dominated everybody. He's a very dominant wrestler and jiu-jitsu guy, and now he was in a fight. So, quickly, if you're just joining me, thank you for joining me, by the way. We are thinking about a fight a young gentleman fought tonight, and after round 2, he said, I don't want to fight anymore. I want to stop the fight. I don't want to continue. And he said it to his corner. His corner didn't agree. I'm going to talk about that a lot. And then he said it to the ref. And of course, if you say it to the ref. So before I get into what's actually going on in the mind, now we all judge. So I got actually a lot of messages from people saying, this guy said he wanted to quit. I don't know, that was awful what the corner did. We're missing a lot of information in that situation, a lot. I say this often, 90, and I mean it, could be more, 90% of the information of what is happening in a fight is only available within the experience. Now, I had 9 pro fights, very low level. The gentleman fighting tonight only had 5. It takes a long time to understand what is happening in this fight. Also, we're sitting there judging the corner. Drysdale and the corners, they have more experience than the young man, and they actually understand what's happening. So first of all, don't judge, don't get angry, don't say the corners did a bad job, it's despicable. You're missing much of the information. I'll tell you what the corners know, right? I'll tell you what the corners understand here. So first of all, and we did a hit on this for TSN, for my job on SportsCenter, just now, with my friend Aaron Bronstetter. And Aaron made a great point. He's like, the corner is trying to help him because he's going to regret it later because it will have a bad effect on his career. And I added, more than that, 20 minutes later, it says here, the corner didn't know their fighter has no heart. No, that's not right. You can't judge this. So why do humans behave the way they behave? What are we? We're a whole bunch of tissue run by a brain and a nervous system and a spinal cord. We judge people. You're sitting there. This kid trained, fought, sparred, did all the things, never quit. Hundreds of times that most people who judge him would already have quit. He never did. But in a fight where all of a sudden all his other fights were dominant victories, and now he's feeling the battle, he's never experienced this, his brain he's not been mentally calloused up to it, and all of a sudden he's in it and he's overwhelmed. Here's what's happening. Okay, and the corner knows this, whether they know it like Joe Science, like I'm going to tell you, or they just know it instinctively and from experience. When you are fighting the other man is a very, very small part of the fight. The real fight is you are fighting yourself, and that is not a metaphor. That is not a cliche. You are fighting yourself. You will have thoughts. Your brain will try to sell you out. Why? Because we are complex organisms. So here's the fight that's actually happening within that fighter. The amygdala, we sometimes call that the lizard brain. It is responsible for, among other things, it's part of the limbic system, and it's responsible for fight or flight. It deals with emotion, and anxiety takes place in the amygdala. Thought process. I actually was pulling it up here because I mentioned it on the show. Aaron and my coworkers really seemed to enjoy it. when you're fighting, you're hoping to use, at the high levels you're using, John Jones is using all these people, you're operating within the prefrontal cortex. I'll tell you what that's for. Focusing one's attention, predicting the consequences of one's actions, and anticipating events in the environment, impulse control, managing emotional reactions, planning for the future. That's the prefrontal cortex. What's happening when the guy's going, I can't do it, I want to quit, his amygdala is fucking going crazy, right? If he could get himself operating, and anybody who's judging, he's a quitter, he's got no heart, these are most, and no offense, but these are if you're one of them, please consider that many of us who do that are people who avoid stressful situations. This is not a person, this is not an environment where you can avoid a stressful situation. So what happens is your amygdala starts to take over. Again, that's emotion, that is anxiety, that is fight or flight. Like fight, or which he tried, or flight. I can't do it. Your brain starts to sell you out. And that is something we don't talk about. It's something that's very difficult to understand. It's something that all fighters who fought, again, I only had 9 pro fights and they were at a very low level. But 9 is a fuck lot more than that kid in there tonight. I experienced that. And it can cause you to fail. And if you talk to him 3 days before, a week before, last year, and said, somebody says, you're looking too deep into it. I can't read the rest of what you're saying. There's never too deep. Deep means looking further layers. Shallow means, I just think this means this and he had no heart in this. No, to understand behavior, to understand humans, to understand actions of other people and what is happening. I fought. I've analyzed fighting for 20 years. There is no too deep. There's too shallow. Too shallow is, that guy's a quitter. Too shallow is, that corner should have known. Most of the people saying that have almost no expertise whatsoever and no personal experience. And most of the knowledge of the reality of what is happening can only be acquired within the experience, right? So we're all sitting there yelling at this corner, or we're all sitting there judging this guy, and 99.99 repeating of the people doing that have almost no actual information. And sometimes, like we said, and I'm not being mad, it's kind of you to be on my stream and to watch this, but somebody just said, you're looking at it too deep. That's a knee-jerk reaction to somebody who's like, I don't really want to think about it. I don't need to understand it. But here, let me explain it. As I was saying, it's like the part of the brain, the primitive part of the brain that evolved to protect us from saber-toothed tigers, to run for our fucking lives so we would survive as a species and be able to pass our genes on to our offspring because we lived. That is the amygdala. That is part of the limbic system, and it's there to make you fucking run away from a fight. If the danger, you experience the danger, the emotion, and the anxiety too high. And that's what that young man did. And when his corner is saying, no, 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 the corner is trying to operate him back into the prefrontal. Now, if they really, and this is no judgment, this is some complex nerd shit. But if you really study it, say Greg Jackson or for us, for example, these guys will recognize that. They will recognize, wait a second, this guy's operating in his lizard brain right now. And they may have tools and tactics and little jarring ways to push him out of that, right? So, but when we judge him, he's behaving in the way that we would all behave. And trust me, the people most likely to run and never fight or only fight for 10 seconds or actually quit the first time they sparred are mostly the people who will point fingers at him. This is a young man who trained and grew as a martial artist all the way along until the stress and the anxiety was so intense, he was capable of no other choice. The reason, as I said, that his corner tried to convince him otherwise is whether they understand this in a nerd science way that I'm explaining it, or they understand it intuitively and instinctively from their own experience. Again, Drysdale and the corners have fought, cornered, competed. They've had that experience. Most people will never have it, but what happens is you are shocked at your own brain's behavior. Somebody says, bite down and swing for the fences. That's what a true fighter does. Again, I'm not meaning to judge you, but you don't know what a true fighter does. And not at that level. It takes 10, 12 years of commitment, training, pushing through these things. And then you get to that point. His strategy was compromised, experience shined. You get to that point in there, and then you're shocked at how you behave. And the people, and again, I'm not trying to, and if you're watching this after the fact, you won't see the comments. There's a couple of people, again, thank you for watching my stream. I'm not trying to argue with you. I just have decades of experience related to this, and I'm trying to make you understand. This is beautiful. This is not, this doesn't in any way undermine what is happening in there. If anything, I believe it enhances it. To understand what is going on is to understand ourselves, understand the human animal. So when we look at this guy on that stool, overwhelmed with this, I cannot do this, he has entered a panicked environment. Now, let me tell you, if you asked him, and I was saying this earlier when I got sidetracked, you've asked him 2 hours before, or a week before, a month before, what would be your greatest regret is if I quit on myself. He would tell you that. Somebody said adrenaline dump. Completely, adrenaline dump is a metaphor. And it's actually, we talk about it incorrectly. Adrenaline, when adrenaline is dumped into your body, it lights you up, and then there can be a crash after like too much sugar or not enough sleep or whatever. But although the adrenaline is related to the limbic system, and it's related to the sympathetic nervous system, which is the same part of the brain that is making the guy freak out and have to quit, but it's a panic state. It's not a guy, again, the prefrontal cortex sitting around, all of us sitting on our couch judging him are saying, this means this, and if it happened this way, then this will be his career, and he's thinking about this. All of the consequences of his choice, all of the consequences of his choice of the future, of what it means, how he'll regret it, how it could affect his career, all of those things, non-existent, as his amygdala overrides his entire brain. So if you knew that, and you're in the corner, you know that he would beg you to beg him to not quit. You know that in 10 minutes, in 20 minutes, he's going to be devastated that he quit. Tomorrow I'll tell you, when you fail, and you fail because of of this type of experience, and most fighters have it on some level, whether they look at it deeply or not, maybe not normally as big as this, you cry like with a pain, with an emotional pain that you have almost never experienced, and most people will never experience, because you put yourself out there so far to a point that you fail. You fail mentally and emotionally, and it's painful. If any of that was entering his prefrontal cortex, and was able to weigh it, he'd be like, I can't quit. All I got to do is 5 more minutes of fighting. But that didn't happen. His brain overtook. The primitive part of his brain overtook it, and he couldn't do it. Again, the other talking point that we're kind of discussing is that the corner begged him to keep fighting. Why? Because they've been there. Everybody is saying it's despicable, oh my God, that was awful, whatever. You haven't been there, but they have. They've experienced that. They understand that if you can get past that barrier of your own brain trying to protect itself from your choices, you then can perform freely. They know that from experience. Sometimes they've even experienced it themselves, been so terrified that they thought they were going to have to quit or bail or not show up for the finals of their whatever. And then in the end, it says, listen to your fighter. No, listen to what I'm telling you. They are fighters, and they know that 20 minutes later, he will regret it more than anything. And it's a momentary freak out of his brain, of his neurology. Hope he doesn't feel bad. He just got a bad experience. He does feel bad. He feels terrible. He feels terrible. Even though he shouldn't, it's no judgment on him. It's a normal human behavior, which is why Normally, you don't go from 5 really fairly easy or easier fights to suddenly in a week you're in the UFC fighting for your whole career. Normally, we like for a fighter to get progressively more difficult fights and have fights where the opponent pushes back, gives you a little additional challenge, and slowly you armor up your psychology and you callous your brain, you callous your emotions, you callous your mental toughness. David Goggins uses that term, callous up your mental toughness, and that's it. And what I'm telling you isn't some weird opinion. Somebody said, which fighter quit? I'm not mentioning his name. I don't want to bring it down on him. Also, I rarely mention the name of the guy who lose. You can't callous on the fly. Very well put. You can't. You slowly. So how do you callous your thumb if you're a bass player? Slowly over time, playing. The tension and the friction slowly causes your thumb to callous. And your emotion and your mental toughness is the same. Slowly, bigger and bigger tests, slightly being pushed to a higher level, a higher limit, higher consequences, higher meaning will toughen you up. This young man didn't get that. And there's not a fighter out there who hasn't experienced this on some level. Normally, it's rare to have experienced it to complete failure. And that's difficult. One thing I will say is I have seen this before. It's happened in fights I've been commentating, but it's usually at the lower level. And usually what they're saying is, I don't want to be I've realized in this moment I don't want to be a fighter. Now that can go away. Literally by now, that young man he's devastated, but he's like, I'll show you guys, I'll come back tougher, and he might. But that young man was promoted up on short notice, same thing as lower level, exactly. He is, and this is something that's going on right now a lot in the UFC. These are regional fights. These are fights that would be on Titan fighting and lower, and Titan's a good show. Lower level fights. These are lower level fighters on lower level fights. It's last minute. There's mismatches, and what he did was very, very normal. His brain tried to protect himself from himself. And what his corner did was very, very admirable. They know what was happening. They know that he would beg them at any other time, please don't let me quit like that if I had that experience. But he couldn't have known that he would have that experience. That's why you become slowly acclimatized to this kind of pressure, this kind of stress. Take any person off the street and throw them in a fight, or throw them on television to have to speak, and a lot of them shit their pants. Never mind fighting in your underpants, right? So that's what's happening there. It's fascinating. We humans, we experience these things, and then you have to decide, how you go from there. Somebody says, Dana White is watching this kid go to the big show. It's pressure, right? Please don't I can't read. I'm sorry. It's very small here. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. True, and that's true. And yeah, Mike Tyson said that, but it's true even at the high levels. People talk about what was the game plan? It's like fighters don't say that. Coaches don't say that. People who write articles about fighting but never did it say that. Why couldn't you stick to the game plan? Everybody knows you can't fucking stick to the game plan in large quantities of circumstances. It's interesting tonight. Josh Emmett was like, you media, why the fuck would he care what people who don't train think? People who report on politics or report on football or report on hockey or report on fighting don't do those things. They're journalists. Journalism is its own skill, but that skill doesn't involve knowing anything about fighting, not really. So why he would care what a writer or a reporter would say? But we are human. We're human. We're affected by these things. Would you say this is a result of the UFC looking for young up-and-comers? No. I would say this is a result of them being like, holy fuck, we have to make a lot of shows, and we don't have a lot of fighters that are available in the US. So, they sent out emails saying, even young guys, if you got anybody, let us know. I live to fight another day. The kid was gassed. That's not it. Now, you may have missed what I've been saying for the last 18 minutes about his brain overtaking him, and he was not done. but he felt like he was, and his corner knew that. Anyways, I gotta get going, guys. This has been really fun. It's been really, it's a really cool thing to be able to sit and sort of think about these ideas and express them on a deeper level, and to have, you know, sometimes 50, sometimes 100 people come along for the ride, and then 1,000 or thousands watch it afterwards. It's a really cool thing. But I hope you got something out of this, not just about this guy and what happened here, but this is all of us. We like to, thanks for taking some time out of your day. I'm reading notes, by the way. You're welcome. Thank you. It's my privilege. This gives us insight into all of us. We think we're running this thing, but sometimes that thing's running us. You ever do something, you yell at somebody who cut you off in traffic, or you kind of snap back at your mom or your girlfriend or something? You're like, why did I do that? Well, you're not fucking running that thing all the time, right? And you're just, you know, normal, slight anxiety or pressure or a stressful environment, and sometimes we snap because we're regular people. This is a fuckload more stressful than that. So if you've ever mouthed off to your mother and then thought, oh, I feel bad, I shouldn't have said that. Why did I say that? That's a similar part of the brain. That's that similar, like, stress causes a reaction. You're like, wait a second, I didn't decide, I didn't choose those words. Well, he didn't choose to quit. His brain chose it for him. And that's a very difficult and painful experience. But once you learn it, you can become stronger. Again, you callous your mind. You know, you armor up your mentality. And this is part of that experience. To get anywhere, to get to being successful, whatever you think that is, to become a Navy SEAL like David Goggins, or to become a UFC fighter like the ones we saw tonight, or to become some guy talking on Instagram or YouTube, or to become you know, a doctor, or to get a job, or to ask somebody on a date. It requires a certain amount of experience, and failure is part of that experience. Failure is part of every success, sometimes many failures. And that was part of this is a failure that this young man experienced. It is very possible, it'll be difficult, very difficult, but it's possible that 3 years from now, he's talking about this experience as the most formative thing in his life, and it's become incredibly strong because of it. Or he might be like, fuck that. That is not what I want to do. Fighting in a cage on television, fuck that. I'm glad I found out now. And that's cool too. I mean, most of us don't fight in cages for a good reason, right? But thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. I will be back later this week. There's some UFCs almost every weekend, and when Bellator starts back up, we'll be working on that as well. I'm a very lucky guy, and I'm very grateful. And I'm grateful for you guys. Much love. Enjoy the hostilities, my friends. Blackout.